let's get started. So Hunter, welcome. The floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you very much, Shrikant. Metamodernism. So metamodernism is what comes after postmodernism. Postmodernism is what came after modernism. So understanding metamodernism is easier when you understand that context. So I'll be brief, but I'm going to say that regular modernism is sort of this idea that we need to have the answers to the big questions. And what we're doing here, why anything matters, how we're supposed to comport ourselves, how do we relate to each other? And it also says that it has those answers, right? So you can find lots of systems that say we need these questions answered, and here are the answers. Religions will do this, political philosophies. There's a sort of scientific philosophy that a lot of people base their answers to these big questions around. But, in the past several decades, there's been postmodernism. And the idea of postmodernism is something like skepticism towards these big theories that say they can answer all the big questions. And as postmodernism has been running in our culture, there seems to be evidence that it's kind of winning. Like anybody that thought they had all the answers is welcome into a debate. And then all the postmodernism people will just ask them, why this, why that? Can you prove that? How do you know this? And we've had those debates. We've had them for decades. And the modernists keep losing them. So society is sort of trending more and more postmodern, which is associated with these trends like minimalism. We can't prove anything, so don't have anything you can't prove. Nihilism, we can't give you any of the big answers. All of the big questions are unanswerable. There's no ground beneath your feet. There's no heaven above, no hell below. So, John Lennon sort of expressed some of these ideas. And it's leading down a path that is now beginning to look pretty dismal. And there's a lot of people who feel like there's no meaning left. They used to derive meaning from these systems, and now they don't feel like they can anymore. Some people get a lot of meaning out of, seeking the truth, and what that means in a big way in the postmodern age is disproving everything else that can't prove itself. So we keep running out of things. We're getting emptier and emptier. And one of the ideas, a little bit in the vein of Nietzsche, was, well, at some point we'll start making our own values. But at least so far, it doesn't as much seem like that's what's happening. It seems like instead what's happening is without the traditional modernist systems and answers, we're sort of reverting to old, almost, what's the word here? Like savageries. And we're becoming highly polarized, like we hate each other. It's like the best thing, like here's a way to put it. The best thing about Biden is he isn't Trump. The best thing about Trump is he isn't Biden. Okay, well, what about anything else about them? And it's like, well, that's not why I'm voting for my guy. I'm voting for my guy because he's not the other guy. And why not just hit as hard as I can? Why not break all the rules to do it? You can't prove there's anything morally wrong about it. You can't prove there's any, eternal consequences. That sort of seems passé these days. So postmodernism seems to be bearing some fruit that we're not very happy about. And so the metamodern idea is, okay, we're now in the late postmodern age. And the time has come to shift, because otherwise we're going to drive off a cliff and that'll be the end of it. But how can you possibly get past the postmodern thing? Because that's why it's succeeding, is postmodernism is strong. They do win the debates. The modernists can't justify their answers. They try and they say they can, but then as soon as you get them down to particulars, sometimes they resort to faith. Sometimes they resort to, what else are we going to do? Yeah, it doesn't seem to be working. How can you possibly get past postmodernism? How can you answer nihilism? It doesn't seem like we can justify anything. It doesn't seem like we can know anything. So metamodernism tries to get past this not by proposing answers. It does not claim to just be a better version of modernism and say, yes, we need all these answers and we finally have the right ones that'll be able to beat the postmodernists in debate. It's not like that. It's more like postmodernism has a bit of a performative self-contradiction. Is postmodernism says something implicitly like, yes, you're right, modernism. We do need the answers to the big questions, but we don't have them. And so it's all very sad and we're in a rough place. But how does postmodernism justify that we need these answers? It can't justify that. And postmodernism seems to say something like, because this system can't be proven, we must abandon it. But how does postmodernism justify a must? There is no must. There's no therefore. There's no so we need to. Without any of those things, there's a sort of radical freedom that comes along with the radical ignorance that postmodernism has established. I think a great example of this is the movie Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's fantastic, very emblematic of our time. Because what happens in this movie is there's a character, her name is Joy, and she, long story short, she gets the ability to tune into the whole multiverse and all the versions of herself across every possible version of everything. She puts everything on a bagel, everything, all of her dreams, all of her hopes, cute dogs, all moral systems, all religions, everything on the bagel. And it becomes this black hole. And she says, when you really look at everything, you realize nothing matters. And then she creates this black hole bagel as an attempt to finally be able to die. That's her big hope. And at the end of the movie, what happens is her mother says, you're right, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't. You're right. But so what? Just because it doesn't make sense doesn't mean I need to go to the bagel. I don't need the black hole. That's what happens when you dissolve part of your system, but not all of it. Postmodernism isn't going far enough. If postmodernism would dissolve a little bit more, it would dissolve its own presuppositions and stop saying, you're right, we have to feel bad unless we have these answers. Positive emotion is a material phenomenon. Negative emotion is a material phenomenon. You don't feel good because you can prove that it makes sense to feel good. You don't feel bad because you can make an unbeatable case that it makes sense to feel bad. Modernism a little bit sets us up for failure because it holds up this idea that we need these answers. And then it says, yeah, but I can give you them, fine. And then postmodernism comes along and says, no, you can't actually give us the answers, which means that what we're left with is that reality is poison. But if you would dissolve that part too, then what you get is this radical freedom that says, how does positive emotion actually work? How do good societies actually work? The modernist answers pretended that I as an individual work, we as a society work because of XYZ theory of everything. That was never how it worked. Even when those systems were succeeding, they were never succeeding for the reasons they said they were succeeding. And metamodernism is this idea that if we look at the actual causes and effects that lead to what we're looking for, we don't need these answers after all. And so where we've come to now is that in this radical freedom that comes along with this radical ignorance, we now have an unprecedented opportunity to look at every system that ever was and said that it had something and say, look, it wasn't because of what you said it was. And it wasn't for the reason you thought it was, but you did do something. It was working. It was changing people's lives. It was improving societies. Why did it actually happen? And maybe we don't even need to know precisely. It's not exactly about getting the one right answer. The point now is, although modernist systems gave pretty good results, they tended to exclude every other system out there as well. And what we can now do is examine every system and take all the best things from every system and no longer be bound by loyalty to any one system. In the past, you might have had an erudite scholar who, might have believed in their own modernist system, but was willing to learn about other ones. But they never maybe embraced it the way they would have if they weren't afraid of losing their own system. Well, we're not afraid of that because we don't have any system anyway. So, give me the best of every religion. Like, let me look at Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, all of it. Let's look at all of them and say, I don't need any of you to be right. I don't need any of you to be wrong. So what can I find in you that worked? What can I experiment with and find out for myself if it will work? And maybe will work better than anything ever before. Because whatever it was that was actually making Christianity or Islam or whatever work, maybe it didn't have some of the things that was making Buddhism work. And so we have this new opportunity to get a better system than ever before, precisely because we're less insistent on the idea that it's going to be the one final true system. That was always the weakness. The insistence that this system had everything was always what kept it from being willing to accept what it just didn't have. It just didn't, So with our new freedom, we can synthesize all of the insights generated by humanity's cultures and produce a sort of chimeric combinatorial culture with greater power and ability to transform and improve than ever before. And this may be also what we need to do in order to get past what I call dialectic snags. Like, in theory, culture is running. It's running its thing, and people are talking, and ideas are being shared back and forth. And if you just keep running that long enough, we'll get better and better answers. But it seems like on certain issues, we end up at loggerheads, and we're just stuck. And the longer we stay stuck on the hot button issues, the more and more energy gets poured into them, which means the less and less energy goes to other things. And if they're stuck enough, all the energy we're pouring into them is not sufficient to get us unstuck. And so the question is, what is the physics of the dialectic? How do you resolve these apparently unresolvable debates that are going on in our cultures? And I think it all comes back to this same idea that these systems never worked for the reasons they said they worked. These snags happen not because people are unreasonable at heart, but because they're asking the wrong questions and they're so afraid to give something like aid and comfort to the enemy. I can't stop fighting as hard as possible for my guy because I need the other one to lose. So no matter what you say, I need, to block that out. I don't want to give you an inch. If I give you an inch, all will be lost. So what can metamodernism provide to help us get past these dialectic snags? And I think the answer is, there's a few, but one is, you are probably really stubborn about your position because you're in touch with something real and right. The thing you say you're in touch with that is real and right may not be the real thing, but you're not holding on to this arbitrarily. You've seen something, you've perceived something that provides you with the necessary energy to push for it and to be unwilling to let it go. All right. So what if we, instead of sort of this postmodern negative approach of disproving you, go a little bit in a back and forth? This is the idea of metamodernism. We go back and forth between sincerity and irony, between modernism and postmodernism. Sometimes we believe in the meaning, sometimes we don't. And you say, well, isn't that a contradiction? And the answer is, you're not a book, you're not a map. You have a map, you have books, so to speak. But you can look at different things and genuinely see them in different ways and come out on the other side of that and still be you. And you're not going to lose the truth because you were willing to look at other answers. And so this leads to this idea that if somebody's unwilling to move on a position, maybe what I want to do is start out by validating their position. I want to find all the truth in it that is insisting. It's almost possessing this person, gripping them and forcing them to fight for that truth. We'll give it a victory. It's true. It deserves the victory. Doesn't mean necessarily buying what they say is going on, but you look for all the good in that position. And this is a little bit of a more radical idea, maybe you even turn their ideas up to 11. I don't think you're going far enough. I think you should do even more. And they say, yeah, finally, somebody gets it. And then you say, yeah, and it should be even more. And you turn it up again, and they say, oh, yes. And you say, and more. And they say, wow, that's a little much. Like, come on, like this is, you can go too far. And now they're finally in touch with whatever dynamic they were leaving out before. And so you push people's stubbornness to a point where they themselves say, okay, let's not go too far with this. You say, well, why not? And they say, well, for X and for Y and for Z. And you say, those are really good points. You could go too far with that, couldn't you? X, Y, and Z are good points. That's kind of what the other side always says when they criticize you, is X, Y, and Z. And, all the things you say about them, maybe we can get those same points on their lips if we turn their things up to 11 and 12 and 13. And then they finally say, well, let's not go too far here. And so these dialectic snags may be resolvable if we pull back from this sort of correcting default that postmodernism has emphasized. And that there are people, maybe like a Richard Dawkins type, who don't feel comfortable with the idea of like exaggerating or really adopting a perspective that isn't true, precisely because they care so much about the truth. But I would say exactly for that reason as well is why we need to do it. Because to actually get where we need to go and could go, we need to have a little bit more faith in ourselves and say, I can let go for an instant from this, what I'm pretty sure is the right answer, and really get in your shoes. And then maybe you can relax a little bit, and maybe your opponents can relax a little bit. Maybe we can come a little bit closer together. And so you can look at issues like the trans debate going on. I have a very America-centric sort of, those are the things I'm in touch with. And I think it's such a snagged issue because the question is just not working on either side. No, we're not getting anywhere. The big question apparently is, what is? What truly, deeply, metaphysically is a man or a woman, and this and that debate's not going anywhere. But what if we say, okay, so you started acting like the other gender, and something about that was rewarding. That kind of makes sense because there are lots of virtues, in the one gender that aren't in the other. We probably should be exploring the other genders more. We shouldn't be only developing the virtues of one side all the time forever. There's a lot to be learned from these kinds of explorations. And if you say that it feels really healing for you to do this, there's a plausible case to be made for that. We can talk about these kinds of things without getting into these impossible metaphysical ontological questions about the deep true nature of gender or sex or whatever. And on the other hand, we can say, you don't think that we should be doing this. It's like, well, there's a lot of virtue in you just being like, no, this is who I am. These are the virtues I'm trying to live up to. This is the role I want to play. You know what? That's how we got this far, isn't it? At least in recent history. Although if you go back farther and farther, and in other cultures, you see these sorts of gender explorations all over the place. Festivals, people dressing up, and actors playing different roles and learning from doing so. And we could probably all benefit from acting out the role of either gender in like a play. You'd probably learn a lot doing that. And I think part of the reason this debate doesn't go anywhere is because nobody admits there's anything good about the other side. And if we were to really talk to each other and drop why we say we're right and instead focus on our actual experiences. Look, my actual experience is, I did this and this, and then I felt this. Okay, that's real. That happened. We know that. That is trustworthy, reliable, important, insightful, and you are really stubborn about it. So it's probably in touch with something pretty important. But if we acknowledge all of that, maybe we can start appreciating each other. You can look at something like American diversity in a similar light and say, because America is a very diverse country, maybe the most diverse of all of the large countries anyway. And that can be a strength or a weakness, because on the one hand, we have so many different cultures and perspectives that each have different virtues and emphases and things to teach each other, things we can learn from each other. But on the other hand, there are people who say, don't act like that race. You're acting like that race. You're acting like that. Don't do that. You have to be who, whatever yours is. And it's like, well, you've just given up what could have been the biggest strength of American diversity, is the ability to take all the virtues from all these systems and combine them and learn from each other. And you can see maybe similar things on climate change. For a long time, the debate was if it was happening or not. That's not going anywhere. Of course, that's not working. So what can we focus on? We can say, look, you're making some really good points about the potential climate problems that could come up. And we say to the other side, you're making some pretty good points about how the current attempts to solve this problem don't look very promising at all. And if we don't have an answer, how to put this? It's a little bit like, if we're saying it's going to be a disaster, it's going to be like a -10 if we don't do anything. Well, but here's a solution, so-called, that'll bring it all the way up to -5. And it's like, that's not a solution. Like, shouldn't we be looking for an actual solution? Can anybody point to a plan so far that would be predicted to actually work? And the answer is no. All the plans so far are predicted to like ameliorate the effect and then still lead to a complete disaster. Well, no wonder like nobody's getting very excited about that. But the other, as far as anybody's concerned, the other position is to ignore it completely. Well, that's a heck of a choice. What if the alternative choice was, can we actually talk to each other about this? Can we actually acknowledge and appreciate the good points being made on both sides? And I don't know what the solution could be. And like, we'd need the experts to really be able to talk to each other without it being so politically charged. But maybe we could come up with something, like we've come up with something forever for everything else we've ever encountered in the past. But that's not going to happen if all of the energy is being poured into this useless debate that's going nowhere. So on each of these issues, we're sort of at loggerheads. We have these dialectic snags, and everybody's focus is on criticizing what is wrong with the other side. And they're so stubborn because they're right. They are right to criticize the other side. But you can forever focus on criticizing the other side because you're right, or you can try something else that might actually work. And what might actually work could be to shift the debate, to show genuine appreciation for each other, to appreciate what's left out of our own perspectives, and try to push the dialectic step by step forward and have some faith in that. Like, it can be scary to let go of the potential of a -5 when the alternative is a -10. But if you have a little faith that if we really were to talk about this productively, we could get somewhere better than a -5. But that takes some faith, because the temptation is, no, we have to hold on to the -5 no matter what, not give an inch to the enemy, no quarter given. That's not going anywhere. And so it seems to me that this is where metamodernism might be able to apply to these specific political issues. So this is how I see metamodernism has the opportunity to create something like more wholesome societies. And wholesome, I think, is the right word, with this emphasis on wholeness, because we're trying to include and integrate everybody's perspectives in some sense. We're not trying to, sacrifice anybody because they're wrong and so they don't count. We're trying to include everybody. But I think that this can be applied fractally. So it applies at the level of a society, it applies at the level of a community, at the level of a family, at the level of an individual. And within the individual, and this is where part of the metamodern idea is it goes beyond a political system. The fractal nature of this system suggests that the same things that resolve snags in the cultural dialectic can resolve our personal issues. There's a part of you that's stubborn and feels like it needs to say something and refuses to let go, and you keep trying to make it go away, and it keeps saying no. Maybe it has a point to make. Maybe it's stubborn for a reason. Maybe if you appreciated it and validated it and even turned it up and said, you know what, you're right, you're not going far enough, at some point, that part within you might say, well, let's not go that far. Like there's other points to be made on the other side of this thing, And you say, I think that's a good point. That's a good point. There are points to be made on the other side, aren't there? And this is integration within the individual and at the societal level. Now, part of this idea, which is perhaps the most extreme and radical part, is the idea that it could kick off a runaway improvement process, a self-perpetuating process that leads to faster integration than anything else. And not even like 50% better, but like leaps and bounds better. There's this idea I call the winning meme. So a meme is an idea. Richard Dawkins came up with this term. A meme is comparable to a gene. A gene tries to survive by helping you survive and helping you pass it on, and now it gets to live in your descendants. A meme is an idea with similar dynamics. You hear an idea, and some ideas are catchy. They stick in your head, and they make you want to share them with others, and they make other people accept them. And so some memes are more successful than others. And so the question is, what is the most winning meme? Like, we don't know what the answer is, but there has to be some meme that happens to be the one that wins. Why does it win? What are the qualities of the meme that make it more successful than every other meme? And a lot of memes succeed by compulsion. They're sticky. They make you afraid to look away from them. They make you feel afraid or guilty or grieving or whatever it is if you stop holding on to them and spreading them. But that is a little bit putting you at odds with the meme. It's a little bit fighting. It's a battle. It is just inefficient. It is. Maybe the winning meme does not compel. The winning meme might be one that when you see it, you can look away if you want. You can look away whenever you want. Nothing will happen. No fear, no guilt, nothing. But if you choose voluntarily to keep looking at it, it has these other qualities that allow it to end up as the winning meme. And, religions especially, and also political philosophies and so forth, have sort of pointed at this idea. And a lot of them seem to point in a similar direction. They seem to say things like love and unity. These things could, bring us all together. It's crazy to think about how fast we could solve literally every problem we have if everybody just tried to help. Like that one thing would literally just do it all within a couple of weeks. But we're not doing that. Why not? Why doesn't love catch on? Why doesn't it spread like wildfire when it would save the world within a couple of weeks? And I think part of the reason is it keeps getting perverted and twisted into this compulsory version of love. You know, you teach me to love myself, you teach me to love my parts, my pain, my whatever, and now I feel like I'm being bad if I don't. Do you love being bad? Because the winning meme, if it is something like love, it keeps getting it keeps getting its legs cut out from under it. Like, people have these small improvements and changes, but only 1 in a million people becomes a saint or becomes enlightened. You know, very few people even transcend their own personal concerns and focus on building a good society. And we say, you know, that's so sad and that's so bad, and everybody needs to be perfect, or like they need to be more loving. And everybody's like, yeah, but I can't do that. And I know I'm bad for that, but, you know, I just can't do it. And it's like, no, that's why you can't do it. That you're not supposed to feel bad about this. The winning meme does not compel. If you feel bad when you don't do it, then that is not the answer. The right answer is one where you feel fine not doing it, but you feel even better if you do it. And it's a truly universal love, not a love that says hate is evil and selfishness is sin. No, a love that says, I love evil. I love what I'm calling sin. And if you don't love, I love that you don't love. And if I can't accept some part of myself, well, I love that part of myself that feels like I can't accept that. Oh, you're brilliant. I love that you can't accept that. I think you're making a good point that you can't accept that. In fact, we shouldn't accept anything. And, oh, no, that's going a little too far. Maybe we can accept some things. You know, that's the flavor of love that can maybe kick off a runaway process at the individual level and genuinely allow us to accept ourselves without getting our legs cut out from under us. You know, when we get 2 steps down the road and hit a wall and decide to hate the wall because that's the problem. The wall is the problem. No, we love the wall too. And if you love the wall and you listen to it and you let it push you away and you love that as well, then you get pushed in the opposite direction. You can't keep going back in that opposite direction forever, though. You're going to hit a wall at some point, and then you love that wall, and now you go pushing back the other way. And this time you get past the first wall, and you go back and forth in this oscillation where you accept the good parts of yourself and the bad parts of yourself. As you become integrated, you become capable of transcending your personal concerns and beginning to work for larger and larger spheres of concern. And if you can turn that into a runaway process that doesn't get curtailed at any point, in theory, I mean, the point is there is some winning meme. There literally is. Like, there's no getting around it. And it could be anything. Like, some people would say the winning meme is God. And the whole debate about God being real or not goes out the window because, look, a meme can be anything. It's just an idea. What is the idea that wins when people look at it? What makes it so successful? Well, it's something. Maybe it's love or a version of love. Maybe it's something else. But whatever it is, if we could find it, it would win. That's what it is. We just have to find it. So, it seems to me that for the first time, at least in our history, we're in a position to have the freedom. We've been freed by postmodernism. You know, I'm talking all about how postmodernism makes us think reality is poison and all this. No, postmodernism is great. Postmodernism has so much to offer us. It's freed us to a significant extent, freed us to be able to appreciate what is good about each other. And before we couldn't, because that would be betraying our side. Well, now we can, because we don't have any sides anymore. So we can accept all the good ever generated by culture. And if you put all of that together, is that good enough? I don't know, but it's closer than anything in any one system. So there's no postmodernism is so bad, we're going backwards to some modernist vision. And that's not going to work. There's only forward. There's only ever forward. And maybe when we combine everything, we either have the answer at that point, or we're at least several steps down the road, and we can keep going down that road and eventually arrive at whatever the winning meme is that could sweep the world. You know, that's faith as a mustard seed. The point isn't faith is so powerful that even if it's really small, it can do things. No. The point is it has to start small. It's supposed to start small. And don't blame yourself for not being this mountain or this tree. No, start it small. And then let it be, a little bit bigger than that, and let it keep growing from there. I'm not here to save the world. I have my personal problems to care about. I've got problems in my own body and psyche. And then I've got my own life. And then I've got my family and my community and my country. And that's all fine. Like, I don't have to feel bad or guilty for not being a saint. Maybe this is why we don't get any saints, because everybody feels bad they're not a saint. Well, maybe if we loved each other for not being saints, we'd get a lot closer to being saints. And maybe that's what we need if we're going to transform ourselves and then our culture and our world. Because for the first time in history also, we're right in the middle of this. We are right now becoming a global human superorganism. So that opens up a whole opportunity and a potential pitfall. Things could be worse than ever before or better than ever before. But my hope is that metamodernism, some of these principles and the others that other people might be able to contribute, will allow us to learn from everything everybody else has to offer and strengthen whatever they have to offer. That's part of how the winning meme wins. It doesn't conquer by replacing inferior systems. It conquers, if you want to call it that, by enhancing pre-existing systems, by appreciating all they have to offer and helping them get even more out of what they have than they ever did before, by augmenting it with every other insight. So in my mind, you could have a meta-modern version of every religion and every philosophy, a meta-modern version of a sort of scientific materialism, where we acknowledge and appreciate and integrate all of their insights and then help them get even more of what they want. And maybe when they've had their own perspective appreciated and strengthened, then they'll be willing to unclench a little bit and look at their neighbors and appreciate that, what, you did strengthen, I liked my scientific materialism and all, but meditation actually was a big benefit. I wasn't really doing much of that. I'm glad that somebody else figured that out with some other system, just as an example. If every culture does this, if every system does this, well, then what? Well, then they'll all be better than they are right now. They'll all be happier to be who they are right now, all more accepting of who they are right now. And then maybe that's the key to being accepting of each other. Maybe that's where we get the integration necessary to stop shooting ourselves in our own feet and get a little bit closer to this idea that, we could literally solve every problem at any time if we would all just do the right thing, right? Like, this is not a hard analysis to notice. If we would just be like, how can I help? If everybody did that, that would basically solve everything pretty much right away. It seems far away, and on the other hand, it seems strangely close. It seems almost weird that it hasn't happened yet, considering how simple it is and how easy it is to see. But maybe the reason it hasn't happened is because we're using it to defeat itself. We're using that very vision of unity to make ourselves feel bad. And if we can stop doing that at the individual, family, community, country, and ultimately the global level, then metamodernism may be not the answer, but the path that will lead to whatever the answer is when we put all the insights together. Because no, we haven't done it yet. And now is the time, for the first time, when we could do it. So that's metamodernism.
Wow. Thank you. Hunter. This is fantastic. So I have many comments, I have many questions, and then I'm going to invite everybody else to ask questions too.
Great.
So firstly, I want to connect metamodernism with other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying to now come at it from outside of metamodernism. And I'm trying to see, okay, so I'm just going to go through it sequentially and make some observations. So one is that I think, the postmodernism has failed because it has led to skepticism, nihilism, loss of meaning. At the same time, it has also cleared out a lot of pretensions.
Mhm.
So so there is that.
Right.
But at the same time, you can't just live without meaning. So it is like in process of clearing out a lot of it that needed to be cleared out, it has thrown the baby out with the bathwater, all of it.
Right.
And the other thing is that, I really like one of the themes here. So I'm just going and looking at themes that are running through. So I'm just keeping that aside, and I'm trying to see what is the nature of metamodernism. So one thing is that it is saying it's not regarding the other as other. A lot of the problems of saying, oh, that's not me, that's other.
Mhm.
And moment you do that, you're putting this artificial wall between all the similarities that you have with the other, and you are just making the differences into these huge walls. So one part of it is kind of you're almost you're what's the good word there? You're almost like dissolving the other, dissolving the boundaries, because you're saying, I'm actually open to what you are.
Mhm.
That and openness seems to be a persistent theme here of saying,
Although I'll tell you, there's so much to admire and love about closed-mindedness.
yes, I mean, the thing is that in closed-mindedness, you can grow things
Yeah.
within a particular thing, and at the same time, you can kind of marry the closed-mindedness and open-mindedness in a way where you keep those limits as variables, where you say, oh, to what extent should I be closed-minded, and to what extent should I be open-minded? The other thing is, other thing that is there is the issue of multiple perspectives. You're basically kind of embracing all perspectives, and you're realizing that consciousness itself is not tied to a map or to a particular
Mhm.
perspective. you know Really, the glory of the consciousness is that you can say, okay, can I look at it this way, and can I look at it this way? Can I look at it from this angle? Can I look at it from this you know presuppositions? And all of that you're able to do. So you're kind of, it's embracing of multiple perspectives. um you're also saying, what's good in this? You're looking at everything regardless of what you think of it, and you say, oh, what's good in this? What is really making it work? You're not buying their entire systems. In some ways, the modernists were really fell in love with their own systems. This is, they say, oh, you have to go like this: 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 5. And if you don't have all of that, you have nothing. And this is it.
Mhm.
Just go like this. But what you're saying is that, okay, let me see what it is. So it's like, in some ways, it is like taking something and putting it in a soup pot, large, like a melting pot, where all the flavors kind of mix together, and something new comes out of it, instead of saying that, okay, I'm just going to do this. um, Other big theme that I see here is the combination, the yes and thing. I'll say yes, and you add meditation to it.
Mhm.
Yes, and then you focus on efficiency on the top of meditation. Wait a minute. But so it's like you're doing continuous yes and to everything. The other thing is that you're saying, okay, what can I learn from this? It's like, saying, okay, this is it. This is something maybe kind of old, new, I don't know what it is, but what can I learn from this? That's another angle of it. I really like the word integration. I think that's what this is really doing all the time. It is trying to say what are the combinations here? When I put this together, it's like it is being aware of the limits. It is kind of looking at the limits. You're pushing the limits deliberately to see where they are, because otherwise it's kind of implicit and you're kind of afraid to go to a wall. But here, if you say, this is the wall, then you can say, oh, is it really the wall? And why is this the wall? And something else will come out of that. So you have that. I really like the final idea of the winning meme. What would be a winning meme, and what would be its characteristics? I think that's a really profound question. And many systems have had, like, for example, love. In Christianity and many other religions, or the Tao in Taoism, it's like it's trying to get at the winning meme, that all you need is the Tao. All you need is love. So this approach is there, and there is a lot to be learned from that. So all in all, I found, just very the basic approach. It seems to be kind of integration based. It is trying to be, it's very open, and it is trying to kind of construct things on the fly, making sure that you don't get fixated on anything, and you could remain continuously open to everything. And it's a very powerful way of thinking. So those are my comments, but please go ahead and any comments on that.
Yeah, it's very much about integrating, combining ideas, perspectives from across the world. And it's also, I think, about appreciating the value in separating. It's separating and integrating, separating and integrating. It's, lionizing open-mindedness, including open-mindedness to closed-mindedness. It's lifting up love, including love for hatred. Say, oh, you hate people? Ah, I love that. I love that. See, that's real love. It's not real love if you say, no, don't do that. Do love. Stop doing that. Do love. That's not love. That's talking about love. That's not doing love. Doing love is, oh, you think you're the only one that's right? Man, tell me about it. It's like, oh, you're super racist? I don't think you're racist enough. Why don't you only have your own family? Everybody else should be gone. Just you and your family. Oh, you think there should be others? Well, tell me, why should there be others? Well, other people help in this way. That's a good point. They do, don't they? Maybe there's another perspective here. I think that's why love hasn't caught on. Like, this sounds like if you take a couple of seconds of some of the things I'm saying, and it sounds insane. And we're loving hatred. I don't think you're being racist enough. How could you say that? That's not true. It's like, well, that's not really the point. The point is, they're never going to let go if we're just over here yelling at them all the time. So can we do this radical thing of like actually giving them what they need to be able to open up, including appreciating their closedness? I don't know if we can. I don't know if I can get away with saying that. But maybe that's why love hasn't caught on, not the real love that would potentially transform things.
Wonderful. I'm going to get other people in on the conversation. Folks, would love to hear your thoughts on the presentation. Keep it to maybe about 2-3 minutes, and then you can ask any questions. Go ahead and type an exclamation mark if you would like to comment on the presentation or ask any questions. Judy, are you trying to type? Yes, go ahead, Judy.
This is so meta. I have a friend that just moved to Spain, and he sent me an article of some book reviews that they're doing there in the libraries, and it's called Meta Lyrics. And that led me to think about the word meta, because I really have used it, but I don't really understand what it means.
Mm.
So when I saw this today's presentation about metamodernism, I said, wow, this has to be so meta. It has to be beyond what I can even imagine right now, because that's basically what metaphysics, metadata, meta lyrics, it's like something that you cannot imagine how far it's going to go, because the sky is the limit. It's eternal. It's it's like a nuclear bomb that explodes with the word meta before anything, and because anything can happen. Anything you can think about, anything you can take it anywhere you want to take it. Like this meta lyrics group, they would take these lyrics, and my friend was telling me later, they would take a lyric and just everybody would interpret it in different ways. And I thought that was so incredible. It wasn't there, nobody was just seeing it one way, like Shakespeare wrote it, for example. That's what it meant. And no, it can mean so much more. How do you take it? How do you explain it? How do you look at it? And so anyway, so I just wanted to say that it was really wonderful. That I'm sorry there aren't more people to hear your presentation. I just got the information today that it was on. So if you can repeat it, that'd be great. If you can repeat it at a future, maybe have the presentation that you did for others to listen, because I know this group is much larger, and your presentation it really was very meta.
Thank you.
So thank you very much. It just means a lot. I'm very meta also. I'm trying to be since a long time ago. I try to be open as much as I can, and have been ostracized a lot for that. But I'm open, I'm open, and I love that openness in me, and the people that I hang out with, and the books that I read. I just bought a book from a man called Ian something. I can't remember his name right now, his last name. But he wrote no, it's not McGilchrist. It's anyway, he wrote a book with AI about AI. He asked AI what was the meaning of being human, and the book is on being human, but written by AI. I thought that was so meta, so incredible. So this is what I'm talking about, is the books that I read and the books that I want to read, and the presentations that I read is just basically just opening up to all kinds of directions, that you can't even imagine. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Judy. Great comments. I just want to spend a minute on meta. Meta is going beyond. Like my word, from the New Testament, it is metanoia. Is a word that means noia is whatever ideas that you have, whatever is there in your mind, and what you're trying to do all the time is metanoia, which is continuously going beyond what you know. And it's profound. It's a similar idea here. Thank you. Go ahead, Hunter. You wanted to say something?
No, please.
We're going to go next with T, David, and Katie. T, go ahead. Just a second. I want to make sure you can unmute. Yeah, go ahead, T.
Okay, hi. Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Hunter. And I don't know, just have a lot of things that I was thinking about while you were presenting about just culture these days, and how this whole thing with the gender and all this stuff that we're battling. It seems like we're battling our own demons. It's like I don't understand it per se, but you did touch a little bit about that in terms of how it affects sort of our political system or just our society as a whole. And I mean, I understand this whole concept of being open you know, but I think that there has to be more more understanding of not crossing boundaries of who we are as a human race. Like we're born whatever gender we are. Okay. And the fact that we can go ahead and say things like, oh, I'm transgender, or I'm like, I identify myself as a cat or a puppy. And please, like, I need you to tell me that, like, mandating people to, give these titles and just, I feel like that's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of nonsense going on, and we just really need to come back as like conscience people and really just educate more than anything. I think there's not a lot of education, like especially in our public school systems and all of this. I feel like there's not enough um talk about where society is, and I can just keep going on and on. So
That's good. Thank you. Thank you for putting that on the table. Really appreciate that. Thanks. Go ahead, Hunter. Would you like to respond?
Yes, it's yeah, I think when we see these things and we feel resistance to them, we try to articulate why is this wrong, or why do I feel like it's wrong? And people, they search for the words and then they find something, and it's often the first thing that they then use to express what's going on inside. But the first thing often doesn't capture all the complex sort of insight that is present in that reaction. This is, I was touching on the idea, the debate is, what is a man? What is a woman? I don't think that's why people care about this issue. We're not here because we're, Puritans about facts. I mean, it's very important to me that you believe the right facts. That's the articulation that sort of comes to mind. But there's something deeper in our reaction to this. And it could be a lot of things. Maybe it's just, among other things, it's like our society has some really serious issues we need to be working on. And yet the number one issues we're talking about aren't the ones that shape like the functionality of our society. Like, this is apparently a pattern that happens toward the ends of successful empires, or so I've heard. Like at the end of the Roman Empire, there was a great emphasis on the exploration of gender. And, maybe that was great. And maybe it was allowed by the wealth and the prosperity created by that empire. But it came at the end when they were on their way down. Like, was that the right time? It depends on how much energy you put into it. And on the other hand, what are they really doing and saying? They'll tell us that what they're saying is that they sort of metaphysically, ontologically just are this or that sex. I'm inclined to think there's something deeper going on. Why do they care? It's not just some arbitrary fact they care about either. They're in touch with something that they're finding very rewarding. Maybe part of what they find rewarding about it is a rejection of what comes before. And maybe they're right about that. Maybe they feel like if I'm this gender, it's like I'm saying the people of this gender in recent history have been doing a good job. If I say I'm the other one, I'm saying they're doing a good job. Well, I don't think anybody's doing a good job. I'm opting out. I'm non-binary. Maybe they have a point about to what degree we've been doing a good job, and to what degree we've actually put forth an admirable version of men and women to look at. Maybe we need that kick in the pants from, the young often struggle to get their points perfect, but they often have a point at the same time. And maybe we need that encouragement to say, you know what, maybe if we were more admirable men and women, more people would want to be men and women.
Thank you. Thank you, Hunter. Next up is David, followed by Katie. David.
Yes, good evening, Hunter.
Good evening.
So thank you so much for the presentation. It was excellent. And I do appreciate I'm sure the preparation that you put into having it delivered in such a fine manner. The only 2 points I wanted to make was first to thank you. And then second, I think you may be giving humanity a little bit more credit than is reality. So, you know, if you look at all of history, in essence, ignorance has really driven cultures. So, and it might be the rise of some person who has great oratory skills, but it just seems like, to me, that I think T might have mentioned education as a counter to the ignorance, but unfortunately, I see really ignorance continuing to drive culture, and unless there's some dramatic impacting fear driving emotional call it a calamity on the planet, I really don't think we'll see the unification and the love expressed until things get really bad. So just imagine, you know, a nuclear war where, you know, 90% of humanity is gone, right? Things would change, right? So I think that fear drives cultures. I think ignorance drives cultures. You know, ignorance really drives war, really, because it's a misunderstanding of perspectives that drive into the killings. But you know, all I'm saying is your teaching tonight was excellent, but it's at a level way above really what would be impacting to humanity, just because that's, in my mind, humanity doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is the same. When I say like, well, why aren't there more saints or more enlightened people? You know, if your system has the answers, why aren't there more saints? And they say, look, you don't understand what we have to work with here. Our system,
Exactly. I
right.
don't think there are, you know, we're lower than animals. Animals are not walking around asking who's transgender and who's, you know, there's, you know, a dog doesn't ask its friend that it sees on the street, hey, are you a lady or a guy? It's just one sniff and it's immediate, right? Humans have to talk about it for, I don't know how long we'll be having this discourse, but it's like an idiocracy. So our ignorance has gotten so bad that now we're in a state of idiocracy, and you know, we spend our time talking about these things that are really not that relevant when you look at the span of things that we need to be addressing as humans.
Yeah, from the, you know, Christian or actually, I guess all the Abrahamic religions have the Garden of Eden story, where there's what separates humanity from the animals is something like the knowledge of good and evil, and that this is associated with a fall rather than some sort of improvement. You know, this is a fall, and in some ways puts us below the animals. And with knowledge of good and evil comes inevitably false knowledge of good and evil. And so, because, you know, if a dog bites something and like hurts itself, the dog isn't going to be like, okay, so why did that hurt? And okay, here's the answer. And now they like write down the answer. And now they say, all across the world, let no one ever do this evil thing. We have to start having knowledge to say that kind of thing. It's not until we can have knowledge that we can start propagating false knowledge as well. But
well, thank you. But thank you for the discussion, and I don't want to take the time. I'm running on to the next person. Thank you so much.
All right, yeah. Good night.
Thank you.
If I can follow up on that point, though.
Please go ahead, Hunter.
This is part of what I am worried about. If the emphasis is too much on like high-minded love, universal acceptance, incredible openness, I feel like to some degree this message has been around before, and that message has not spread very far. Most people don't get anywhere close to that, even when they're told that they should. And that's why I think it might be important to say how much we're going to appreciate the low-mindedness and the separation and the hatred and the ignorance, and validate this and say, if we try to make the average person into a saint, it will just fail. But if we say to that person, look, you don't have to worry about others. Love yourself first. And you don't know how, because you keep trying to love yourself. And when you fail, you say, that was bad. You're not doing a good job. You say, no, that is the failure you should love. Listen to the failure. Learn from the failure. Love the failure. Maybe that can work for anybody without them having to be, halfway to sainthood. And if we can just lift everybody up, 10%, well, maybe we can get a runaway process. Because once everybody's 10% better, well, it seems like we're in a much better position to get another 10% better, aren't we? So if we really meet people where they are and help them obtain their own selfish goals instead of trying to make them sacrifice themselves for us, then maybe on the other side of that, they'll feel a little bit healthier, a little bit wholer, and a little bit more able to at least not, sacrifice all of us to themselves. If we can just get them to the point where they're like, maybe I really want this thing, but I'm not going to go rob anybody over it. Like, I feel a little bit less desperate in my position. Maybe that's what we can do.
Thank you, Hunter. I wanted to follow up with Judy's comment. I really, really like what you're doing. Okay. And I would love to have you back with a little bit of notice on
absolutely.
The thing that I'm most curious about is what you ended up with, which is, what is a winning meme? What is that will really, that will produce this kind of a, runaway process. What would a runaway process look like? And just spend a whole meetup on that. I think that would be a good way of doing it. And
I'd love that.
Yeah. And what we'll do is we'll put this video in that meetup itself, so people would be familiar with what you've said here. And then we will focus on that as a second one. So we'll work some time out, and let's just do this. I think this is very, very good. Okay. Next up is going to be Katie. Katie, go ahead.
I think metanoia seems to kind of line up with Bucky's ethnosphere idea, that we broaden our perspective by looking at other traditions of inquiry. And we also, the other day, had someone from Australia here, and I loved his perspective that he brought in, that some of our natural tendencies might be to, like, intellectually we're broadening, but some of our natural tendencies, like stranger danger or fear of disease or fear of outsiders, might kind of go contrary to that tendency. And then my question for you is, what if somebody doesn't want to live in an examined life? Do they have
to? They don't want an examined life. Like, in theory, somebody who wasn't especially interested in the high-minded, et cetera, we would just say, look, we're just here to help you get your own goals met. We're just here to help you take care of yourself. Whatever you're selfishly interested in, we think there's probably something right. There's a reason you feel so stubborn about it. Like, we would encourage you to love yourself first, even within your own body and mind and psyche. That I have a much higher hope that people will respond to. If somebody were to theoretically reject even that and say, no, I can't possibly accept this part of myself, I don't want to love this part of myself, or something like this. Yeah, I think at that point, the hope would be part of the idea of the winning meme not compelling is that, imagine I have a huge pile of resources that I can give to people, and one way I could spend those would be to spend them on all my friends and my allies. But what I could do is do a generalized offer of like 0.1 utility or gift, sort of just offered to everybody who doesn't reject it. And if they reject it, I stop. Okay. If they don't reject it, then maybe what I do is when they just so happen to do something that I think is better than what they're usually doing, I reward them. Even though there's no deal, we didn't make a deal, they're not promising to do any more of it in the future. They didn't do it for the reasons I thought it was a good idea. all of that. Nonetheless, I'm just here to make it so that whenever they happen to do the right thing, it works even better for them than they hoped it would. Maybe even that sort of selfishness can be sort of selfishly led towards better rather than worse things. And maybe with some people or some groups, you know, that's as far as you could go. You could just say, hey, look, do whatever you want. But by the way, the more you do the things that I like, the better it's going to be for you. And there's no compulsion here. And there's no anything besides that.
Thank you. Thank you, Hunter. Hunter, what I want to do is I want to brainstorm, you know, if somebody wants to pursue this further, what directions should they take? Are there any books that you would recommend? Are there kind of core ideas? One of the ideas that, you know, we've clearly identified is the winning meme. So that's one thing that we can follow further. So I want to ask you in those two different, you know, somebody listens to this and says, oh, I want to know more. What do they do?
Yes. I mean, they could just, I don't know, I guess, you know, I could say, go 80-20, study all the biggest and most successful religions, philosophies, systems, perspectives, and try to find the best bits for you in them. You know, that's a pretty big project all by itself. I don't know of any books that talk about this. I don't know of any groups talking about this right now. I'm talking about it, but other than that, I would say, I mean, you could do what I've done, which is just try to go learn from everybody.
Sure. I mean, I like this very much. I think, you know, if you would like to do, I'm happy to do a series with you on this, because I think the way these things work is that this is a profound change of the way of thinking. And the only way you can do it is by keeping on doing it. In multiple ways. And the beautiful thing about this group is that you will have many people kind of throwing in their own 2 cents, saying, oh, maybe we could do this, maybe we could do this. And we've done this for many fields. So I'm happy to do a series. If you want a monthly series or twice a month, something like that. And what we can do is we can kind of come up with specific things. We can come up with saying, okay, you know what? Let's say there is Taoism and there is Hinduism. How would they look at it?
What might be interesting would be to pick a system and say, what would the metamodern version of this system look like? What does a metamodern Islam look like? What does a metamodern Buddhism look like, etc.? What does a metamodern scientific materialism look like? Yeah. And just try to flesh that out.
Yeah. So come up with something. I mean, does like once in 2 weeks, is that something that you would like to do, or you want to think about it?
I would certainly be down. Yeah.
Okay. Let's plan on that. Once in 2 weeks, we'll continue with this. All right. So
this is late.
Okay. Somebody's got a video here. Apparently that might be relevant.
Okay. Next up is going to be Judy. Judy, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a group that I'm taking a course with. This is just an idea. They're studying, it's called Applied Jung, and they're studying new archetypes. And I think that this metamodernism that you're talking about is a new archetype. And that one of the other archetypes, for example, they just started talking about new archetypes, and they've only mentioned 2 up to now. One of them is the other, and this is about talking about the you know, all the transgenders and everybody else. The other, the person that is not, you know, normal. That's the other is the archetype. And then the other one was Jung as queer, which was very astounding to hear that. But they presented it in a way that, you know, not that Jung was queer, and that so many people like him are thinking like him. So maybe something like that could be hooked into your new, because I think that you're talking about a new archetype, something that has to be developed. And by looking at different cultures and different religions and how these systems are looking at XYZ, this is the way that we can put together some sort of new archetype on the Metamodernism. I don't know. This is just an idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, Jung's individuation is sort of his high, like that's the path to betterness. And his individuation is apparently about reconciling and integrating the masculine and the feminine that you reject within yourself. And so, you know, the connection to queerness there is evident, I think. But I don't think it, I don't know. I really don't know that much Jung. And I also don't know what happens when you do a lot of individuation. But I've certainly tried to learn from the masculine and the feminine virtues. And, you know, it does mean in certain individual instances, I might act more in what would be characterized as a feminine way. But the end result has been also the augmentation, I would say, of my masculine virtues. So that could all be worth talking about.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Judy. So what I was thinking of doing, I mean, one idea I had is that we've spent a lot of time looking at particular things. And it would be really interesting to take one of those systems and do a metamodern version of it. So for example, you know, we've looked at that, you know, I'll give you the menu and you can pick anything that you want. But I think the familiarity helps a lot, because that will get in a whole bunch of people who've spent a lot of time with that. And then they will be able to actually go, it will be a really, really interesting experiment. Because instead of taking something which people are not familiar with, then they would not even know how to proceed there. I think it will, this will work, you know, really wonders. So we've looked at Taoism, we've looked at Hinduism, we have looked at Christianity, we have looked at Jung, we have looked at Stoicism. So these are some of the things that, so whatever it is that kind of interests you, you can think about it, and then we can go ahead into kind of, we can jump into that. All right, so now let us talk a little bit about the most winning meme.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
So, I mean, one of the points that you were making is about, I mean, you presented love as one candidate. So maybe let's just talk about that. Okay. For it to be a meme, it has to be universal. Okay, it can't be that I will love only these people. Or I could say, I can't say that I will just love only people who love me. Okay, that would be like one version of it. Or people, it is love your neighbor, basically, you know, love everybody, love your enemy.
Yeah.
All of that is kind of taken in, because otherwise it is not universal. So it is not, you know, you're never saying, okay, I'm going to look at people who are just here. You're looking at the lowest people.
Right.
And it's all about, and that's a very profound idea. So say, I want to hear you talk a little bit more about, you know, love as a candidate for the winning me.
I think maybe one of the reasons, I think love might be the most important part. And I think maybe one of the, because we've heard of love before, maybe one of the reasons it hasn't caught on the way it could is that it isn't mixed with the right amount of something like wisdom and discrimination, you know. I wonder if the right model, and this is one of the reasons I loved your idea of, you know, online and in person, you know, overlapping. I think that's great. And one of the ideas I have is overlapping matriarchies and patriarchies. Some people think a matriarchy is just another hierarchy like a patriarchy, except it's staffed by women. They're different structures. The matriarchal structure is more flat and equal. The patriarchal structure is hierarchical, with somebody at the top and people at the bottom. And I think maybe if we only emphasize love, that's sort of the matriarchal emphasis, and it won't outcompete the patriarchy. I mean, look at China versus Tibet. Tibet has all the happiest people, and that's so wonderful. Doesn't work out when the armies start marching, though. So the overlapping matriarchy and patriarchy is sort of this idea, and I don't know if I'm you got to be careful about just making patterns and patterns and connections. But if you were to map this onto the male, female, and then there's this idea that some people will express that if the man is the head, the woman is the neck. The head does make the decisions, but the neck determines what decision, about which subjects are decisions being made. That narrowed focus is powerful, and hierarchies have a narrowed, goal-oriented, they pursue specific initiatives at the cost of others. And that's appropriate and powerful. But it has, a lot of potential to become tyrannical and pathological in other ways. And so it ultimately needs to be controlled, and this is to some degree what we have by something like a democracy. I love the story about President John Adams from America. The idea is that he got into a carriage once and people asked him about John Adams. And he said, hey, he's just an ordinary citizen like anybody else. He built the hierarchy. He personally constructed it and then went to the top. And that's all real and important and meaningful. And yet in parallel, everybody's equal. So we need two sets of values or norms or something. One in which nobody is above anybody else in any way. The norms are all equal. The president, the CEO, the anybody. And on the other, there is a genuine, elevation, something meritocratic that says that decision making for pursuing specific aims should be done by those who have specialized them. They've, to some degree, sacrificed their generality to specific competence. And that is a sacrifice that we honor and that we reward and that we empower to guide us. But when it more or less inevitably becomes somewhat pathological, we dissolve that hierarchy whenever we need to, and we rebuild it according to whatever the pressing issues are that are being neglected by the hierarchy. That's one idea.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's very interesting to see the contrast between the states, the hierarchies in Europe versus the structure of the US Constitution. Because US Constitution, you start by saying all men are created equal.
Yeah.
And to protect their rights, governments are formed. Now, this is turning things on its head.
Right. But it's self-evident.
Yes. Yeah.
That was I love Benjamin Franklin's one of my heroes. He was a very clever man. But yes. I have to say I would term that phrase more clever than exactly true.
Yes.
A revolutionary idea, and he claimed it was self-evident. That's very clever.
But exactly. And it's exactly opposite of the entire Western history up until then, because it's all, all about the kings, the divine right of the kings, and, hereditary is the only way to do things, and all of that. The other thing about this is that the structure allows for flexibility. It is structure, but flexibility is built in. Like a kingdom, you basically have to have a revolution and, tremendous amount of bloodshed in order to make changes to the hierarchy.
And it happens all the time, and all the brothers killing each other over who is the king and all of this.
Whereas here, it is kind of built at local levels, and there is stuff at state levels, and there is stuff at federal levels, and there are all these elections at various times. So there's a lot of feedback loops that people can use peacefully in order to steer things in a certain way. So it's very interesting to kind of, to your point of kind of achieving the protection of the equal, some level of protection for everybody. At the same time, use of structure. So that's another direction in that would be to look, kind of going in and trying to learn from our nearest relatives, the difference between chimpanzees and bonobos.
Yes, that's isn't that interesting how that lines up?
Yes.
Yeah, the matriarchal bonobos.
Yes.
And the horribly pathological, I can see the good in the
yes, exactly.
chimps, but they seem pretty horrible.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is that it's like, it's our relatives, both closest relatives, and they are very different from each other and
Right.
very different systems. And it also has to do with kind of the abundance versus scarcity. So stuff like that, in the way it, like, for example, this universal love is a abundance mentality. You're saying, people who have kind of scarcity mentality, they're saying, oh, no, whatever I have, let me hold on to it, because I will lose it. So it's kind of fear versus love. There is that dynamic. At the same time, kind of universal love kind of encompasses both fear and hatred. So it's really, really fascinating to be talking about this. So so we will definitely going to let's do this like once in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to talk about anything else, or you're good?
I think I'll just wrap up by
Please.
emphasizing, more or less, emphasizing again that visions of, utopic visions, high-minded ideals have been done before, and they haven't worked. If this could work, or at least is a step toward working, I think it is because it treats the people who aren't these saintly abundance mentality people differently. That the first other for you to love and be generous with is whatever part of yourself you have othered. And I don't know, but it seems like the more healthy and integrated the individual organism of a human being is, what we would classically call the sort of love for others seems to flow out naturally. That those who do not, find themselves feeling much love for others, feeling much concern for others, are concerned for the other within themselves, the shadow of themselves, which is crying out for attention and healing, and is the appropriate first patient for them. And I'm not here to tell them to stop being selfish or to start sacrificing themselves for others, even though that is ultimately the higher ideal, which could potentially, save and revolutionize things. I'm here to say something like, wherever you are, however bad you are, according to whatever system of badness you believe in, there is a gentle, personally beneficial first step for you. It doesn't ask you to give anything up, but only gives to you. And you don't necessarily ever need to get to the point of working for others. If you just start with working on yourself, you'll either get to the helping others later, or you don't need to, because you've just got a lot of yourself that you're learning to love in the meantime.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Hunter. So to be continued. This was just wonderful discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Shrikant.
Take care, everybody.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.